Welcome to Laney College's Photo 70 video of depth of field. Depth of field is what appears to be additional sharpness throughout the depth of the image. And it's a function of optical sharpness from the lens and apparent sharpness from apertures. Back in around 900 in Persia, we have the demonstration of the camera obscura. This darkened room allows light through a small hole, which travels through the small hole, flips and reverses itself, and shines on a piece of silk. We understood that aspect of light before we understood how it was recorded. Here's a nice diagram of the eye, and what you see is the optician's chart traveling through the eye, through the cornea, through the iris, through the lens, and projecting reversed and flipped on the back of the eye, on the rods and cones, and that information would travel into the brain, and that's how you see. But what we never really were able to do was record, and that all comes later with film and stuff. Here's a good diagram on focus. This is a point of light, and the point of light with respect to the lens is not in a good position, so the lens focal point is really back here, but here is our sensor. So what the sensor sees is a blob, a circle of confusion. Here's another point of light, and here's where the lens is an appropriate distance from the sensor, and it focuses properly as a point of light. Here. Here's another point of light a little further away, and then the lens would focus too close to the lens and not reaching the actual sensor. It crosses again and becomes a circle of confusion. And you've seen these circles of confusion. You see them in movie backgrounds all the time. These are points of light that are out of focus. What's interesting here is while they are out of focus, they are shaped. Because if you look at these things, there are flat spots all the way around. And those are the edges of the aperture blades. There are 9 aperture blades there. So they don't come just purely to the camera. They are being shaped by the apertures. And these are the apertures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 blades shaping the aperture. Now, our focus actually comes from the lens. The optics of the lens are shaped in a certain way to create proper points of light. When a lens is wide open like this, the sensor is getting light from all aspects of the lens. The sharpest part of the lens is in the center. There's a lot of error in the lens out to the edges. And so the image that you create wide open like that at 1.8 is going to be soft in many places and only sharp in a very few places where the optics focus it. As you get into smaller and smaller apertures and larger numbers, you see that the mechanical shaping of the lens is much more specific, and it is taking information by and large from the center portion of the lens, which is engineered optically to be more precise. So you get better information, much more restricted, refined, and you get better apparent sharpness throughout the image. Here's a real nice diagram showing a large aperture. And this large aperture allows for a whole bunch of light in here. And you can see where it converges to make a point is actually a fairly small area. You get back out here, all of a sudden, see your circles of confusion out in here? Now, in using a smaller aperture, these are more parallel. And so that area that would create a mushy circle of confusion is way out here. So we really have greater sharpness over a greater range. Here's a really nice example at f1.8, which is wide open in that other aperture diagram. You can see beautiful sharpness in her eyes, I know there's bittiness in the computer projection, but just go with me on this. And you see the background going out of focus. Now, here's an aperture that's not particularly depth of fieldy at 5.6. It's not a 16 or a 22, but you can start to see more sharpness in the background. All right. You can start to see detail here, where over here it's just bleh. Here's an example of depth of field. Here's a 5.6. We see sharpness here and here, but nothing in here and nothing in here. At f8, we're starting to see sharpness here and here, and starting to see it in the purple grass. And at f11, we're starting to see much more sharpness in the purple grass and sharpness in these points. I'll go backwards. Central sharpness, more depth of field, more depth of field. This is another nice example. This is looking down a fence. You have about 8 inches of depth of field at 5.6. At f11, you get a whole nother board here, about half of a board there. That's about 20 inches of depth of field at f11. And at f22, we're getting about all the way back up to here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boards worth of depth of field, which is about 36, 40 inches. Depth of field is challenged when we shoot up close. Remember, we call those macro shots. And you really need to use very, very small apertures if you want a lot of depth of field close up like this. And you can see just in the width of a pencil, we've lost our focus. Pencil point's good, but as soon as you move away from that, you're losing your focus. This is a pretty impressive depth of field shot, probably about an f32 with a view camera, because you can see pretty good sharpness all the way back here. And that's depth of field, brought to you by the world-renowned photography department.